Sugary concoction, word candy for a political campaign that seeks not to offend. But that conventional wisdom is wrong. Compassionate conservatism is neither an easy slogan nor one immune from vehement attack. It is a full-fledged program with a carefully considered philosophy. It will face in the 21st century not easy acceptance, but dug-in opposition. It will have to cross a river of suspicion concerning the role of religion in American society. It will have to get past numerous ideological machine gun nests. Only political courage will enable compassionate conservatism to carry the day and transform America. That's the thesis of this book, which is being finished on Veterans Day, 1999, 1 year after Texas Governor George W. Bush said on election night 1998 that he hoped to give the GOP a compassionate conservative face. Pundits pounded their laptops that evening, quoting a conservative governor's purportedly fluffy words, not understanding that he was working off a redefinition of compassion that had been a decade or more in the making. Recovering a dumbed-down word. The word compassion from the 1960s through the early 1990s was as much a code word for liberals as family values has become for conservatives. Compassion no longer conveyed what its literal dictionary definition states: come-passion, as suffering with, reflecting the close personal tie of a caring individual and a person in distress. Instead, hundreds of newspaper articles defined a compassionate legislator as one voting for a welfare spending bill. Those opposing such bills were cold-hearted and, by definition, uncaring. In the early 1980s, Bob Woodson, head of the National Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, challenged that apparent liberal monopoly on concern for the inner city. He argued that small neighborhood groups could do a much better job of revitalizing urban communities than could the grand projects of the Great Society. He put together conferences of street gang members gone straight and of tenants who wanted to manage and eventually own their housing projects. But Woodson did not yet have much of a constituency. Liberals were still enamored with big government, and few conservatives paid attention to poverty issues. In the late 1980s, Howard Amundsen, a Christian conservative from California, brought together poverty specialists and academic generalists to explore problems of third world relief and development. The group found that poverty around the world is a spiritual as well as a material problem. Most poor people don't have the faith that they and their situations can change. The group concluded that economic redistribution by itself cannot fight poverty effectively because it does not affect the attitudes that frequently undergird poverty. I learned from listening to Bob Woodson and by participating in the deliberations of the Amundsen group. In 1990, I wrote The Tragedy of American Compassion, which presented a history previously hidden in the stacks of the Library of Congress. The book showed how a century ago, before the federal government ever became involved, thousands of local, faith-based charitable agencies and churches around the country waged a war on poverty much more successful than our own. This history gave readers hope, because they realized, as had American GIs in World War II, that we did it before and we can do it again. The historical record suggested that what worked a century ago to bring people out of poverty would still work, because social conditions were oddly parallel. Americans a century ago had problems with crime, alcoholism, and drugs, opium rather than crack cocaine. Rates of illegitimacy and divorce were far lower then, but more orphans roamed the streets because parents were sometimes carried away in epidemics. Faced with such difficulties, faith-based groups a century ago helped millions out of poverty and into homes. Local organizations had the detailed knowledge and flexibility necessary to administer the combination of loving compassion and rigorous discipline that was needed. My Washington speeches and articles in 1989 and 1990 attempted to define what I was calling conservative compassion. The goal was to break away from the equation of conservatism simply with a vote against welfare spending. Conservative politicians have been complaining for years about a spendthrift modern welfare.